Hey you, it's Ebony with Weird Ideas, and today I'm going to tell you a story that really includes exactly the framework we use in order to have mobilized hundreds of people over the years to commission meetings, and in this case, the state capitol. It includes a stalled bus, an emergency room visit, and different groups of people not always getting along, but advocating and fighting for a common cause. And so today I'm going to show you the exact framework we use in order to implement logistics, inspiration, all of the many details that go into bus rides, plane rides, car rides, confirming meetings with legislators, all for a common cause. I want to show that to you. Probably be a series. This is the first of one. This is the first one, and I'm excited to be able to show it to you today. Okay, let's bring people together. Okay, so today we are going to talk about exactly what we did. We had to mobilize 100 or so people to the state capitol on behalf of a particular cause. In this case, it was on behalf of renters and mobile homeowners. So there's a lot of logistics that goes into that, to say the least, and the work of our team was to be able to ensure that the logistics were seamless. Of course, it wasn't seamless. We had a stalled bus, someone had to go to the ER, and there were a lot of personalities that needed to be managed, but it was a good time, and there were a lot of benefits in the end. Today is the first of hopefully a three-part series. We're only going to talk about the pre-work leading up to the mobilization efforts. So, first and foremost, I want to just lay the foundation. Our job is to not just keep the logistics ball running, not just ensure that it is as smooth a process as possible, but it's also to create the playground and structure in order for people to play. And in this case, people are very serious and very clear about what is important to them when it comes to renters having the same rights as owners. And there's a lot of philosophical dialogue we can have when it comes to ownership of land. Won't have that today, although important. I urge you to really think through what is important to you and your cause, because that will be the foundation that you use in order to inspire people into action. And so part of the pre-work is actually getting people to want to go. Then it's continuing to enroll them in going, ensuring they have the structure so that enrolling them is a seamless process, and then getting them there without them questioning why they went to begin with. And you can do that even when mistakes happen, even when there's bumps in the road. You do that by creating enough structure so that people can move and feel safe. And that's what's really like at the core of the work that we do, is when you're creating ecosystems that you plug people in, their skills, their passions, their expertise, the ecosystem is being created so that people have a safe container in order to do the work or have the creative license that they need to have in order to move a particular cause forward, in order to move a community forward. The structure must be in place, or people either lose interest, they feel scared and don't trust you, or they don't really see the benefit of getting behind the coalition or the organization that you're putting forward. And so our job is to be able to create that container, in this case, many different containers, in order for people to move. So the first and foremost job that you have as the person that's a part of this logistics plan is to create a very clear, structured, and inspired foundation for which people can play, grow, work, relate, communicate, do the work that they're meant to do. And the way that we do that first and foremost is by connecting with the maybe sometimes convening committee or the organization's ED or president. Maybe you're responsible for coming up with what we call the problem. What is the very clear reason people are mobilizing to a local commission meeting or a state capitol or school board meeting? What is the core reason not just the reason that is within your echo chamber, right? We want to, in this case, we want to give the rights back to the renters. That's actually really good, but what is the underlying problem that's causing people to move forward? Something simple, something that usually is coming from your grassroots organizers. It's the dude in the hood that has been advocating for years and understand his people problem more than anybody else. It's the woman who's been doing um, domestic work for 10, 15, 20 years and understands better than anyone why her union needs to be a part of this conversation. You're talking to her or him or them so they understand and so they know you understand what is the core problem. Not what you're putting on a marketing piece, not what sounds good as a headliner for a newspaper, but why does your average person who is fired up and ready to go and ready to throw down with you, why are they taking time off work? Why are they staying late after work? Why do they care to begin with? You have to be the person that's doing the work that's moving this conversation forward. Once you have laid the foundation, one of your very first steps is to ensure that the problem that you've outlined is, in fact, the problem that people are going to understand universally when it comes to the work that's being done. Sorry, I thought someone was coming to the door. Number two is, what is the intention behind this work? The intent is usually the opposite of the problem. I talk about this a lot throughout our videos. Really important to be clear about what the problem and intent is. Now, problem has a lot of negative connotations. We also use the word challenge, but it needs to be something that's very clear for the people that are mobilizing to a particular place so that they know, well, this is the reason I'm showing up. The intention is something that really tells a big story, right? Why am I doing this? And then the desired outcomes are what you hope to gain by mobilizing people to your local meeting or your state capital. And so the desired outcomes are nouns, a person, place, or a thing, obviously. So, for example, 10 confirmed meetings with state legislators, um, two, the group visits two hearings while visiting the state capitol. Um, Members had an opportunity to speak. We press covered the mobilization efforts. You want to make sure that you have these ideas really thought through with a convening committee that has been in charge in part, and that may include you, obviously, where you are putting forward a very clear problem, intent, and desired outcomes, and then the action steps that go along with it. We haven't even touched logistics yet. This is just what is going to inspire people into action. And so, a couple of other desired outcomes that we had to outline for this particular convening was the fact that we needed to confirm meeting with legislators. And in some cases, we needed to have pre meetings with chiefs of staff or aides that's either in Tallahassee, because we're in Florida, or at your district, at the district level, so that you are really advocating before you actually get to the particular meeting. And so when you're doing this work, it helps people that you'll be mobilizing to understand, we just confirmed such and such legislator, they are for or against our work, and here are all the things that we need to prepare in order to support some of the meetings that we have lined up for, in this case, the base building members that we were mobilizing. And so your pre-work really needs to be identifying the problem, intent, and desired outcomes, and then action steps that lead you to understand exactly what the structure needs to be. When you have outlined those action steps with the convening committee, and if it's appropriate, showing and getting some buy-in from the base building or member organizations so that they understand here's why we're doing this. And that does one really important thing that I always want to underscore is it gives people a sense of belonging when it comes to the work that they're doing. They're not just showing up as a talking head, but you know that their narrative is a part of the conversation you're having with the legislators and their staff. Okay, so once we have the problem, intent, desired outcomes, and action steps, and we've passed some of those ideas over to the larger group that's a part of the conversation, you want to be doing this work if you can. And sometimes that just can't be the case because any number of breaking news things happen and you have to mobilize people within a week or two. It's another meeting. That's another video. This particular video is really about where you can prepare and plan. It doesn't have to be a lot of time in advance, but I would say in our case, if we had about 2 to 3 months. I've done convenings as quickly as, well, depending on whether it's locally or state. I've had days to mobilize people, sometimes 24 hours. In this case, we had 2 months to 3 months to be able to do so. And so we had time to get buy-in, get feedback, line up the meetings with legislators, et cetera. Okay, so that's the work of inspiring people. At this point, you do want to sort of establish, and I'm working with the convening committee. So at this point, there is an executive director on the convening committee, dynamic woman, brilliant, doing this work for a number of years, has in some ways has done so much really great work with people on the ground that understand the importance of renters' rights and tenant bill of rights, as well as corporate landlords and how these sort of AI generated rental fees and prices have sort of inspired people, ironically, into action because they recognize that some of the rental increases because of price gouging. And so you're using some of these facts in order to inspire people. And so this particular executive director really understands that. She understands her people. And so she was part of the conversation in order to ensure that we're getting buy-in based on who she knew her base to be, as well as making sure that we were managing the logistics and all the foundational work so that this was seamless for people as they moved and mobilized to the Capitol. Then there was another woman from another organization that had been also doing this work around campaigning for a long time, was a senior director at within the organization, and also had a very clear understanding of exactly what the legislative and mobilization efforts needed to look like in order to support people moving to the Capitol. She was pregnant at the time, so wasn't going to be able to go, but still, towards the beginning of our logistics work, was able to give some insight. And the last person is an attorney and is obviously doing social justice work. She's a social justice lawyer and obviously doing that work within the framework of housing in this case. And so bringing all of these minds together was also part of our job because you're bringing different personalities, putting those ideas on paper, and then moving that into action so that the logistics is working the way it needs to. And so our specialty is really creating this ecosystem so that you can plug people in. In this case, it's ideas on the forefront when you're in this ideation stage. Also sharing some of those ideas with legislators as you prep the staff for what is about to come when you're doing these meetings on the Hill. You can also do this at a very localized level by building relationships with staff, because a lot of times, while they're not the ones that are passing laws or ordinance or making amendments, they obviously have the ear of the elected official. And so our job is to make sure that we're maintaining relationships so that legislators know that one, we're coming, and two, here's what the clear idea and what we're all about. You can do that by creating toolkits in order to support people in making sure they have the right information. Like, for example, a leave behind, which is what it sounds like, meaning there are documents that you're putting in place that you would leave behind when you're meeting with legislators. Starting to put all of this together is really important when it comes to the work that we want to do to prepare all of the people that we're about to mobilize, in this case around housing. And so we also want to make sure that we're prepping the member base about what it would look like to speak to during public hearing. Now, some people wave in support or in opposition, but some people want to speak up against or for a particular issue. And so we do that by making sure that we're clear on what the narrative is based on this particular alliance. Now, there are whole firms that really talk through and research what narrative development looks like. I had to do that with another trip around a particular healthcare bill, where we needed to get really clear about how are the legislators thinking if it's not a bipartisan effort, in order for legislators to understand our position when we're meeting with people that may be on the other side of how we feel about a particular issue. With this particular healthcare mobilization, it was a bipartisan effort, but there were components of the bill that we knew would be removed. And so sometimes that's just the nature of how bills are made. Stuff gets taken out, it gets put in. That happens throughout committee weeks when you're going into session, throughout the different committees as they're meeting. And by the end, you may or may not have the bill exactly as you want it. But that's the reason you have the opportunity over the course of a year, sometimes 2 years, sometimes 5 years, to be honest with you, to get more meat on the bones. In this particular case, it was about continuing to educate legislators about the importance of prioritizing renters in the same way that we prioritize owners, and that means renters' rights, which is a litany of different policies that may impact how people work when it comes to the work that we do, mobilizing them. A lot of these folks have a lived experience and don't need as much education as others. Some people get nervous when they're in front of legislators, and how do you prepare them for that? And so part of our work during this pre-work is to make sure that the toolkit and the leave behind is ready so that people can review them over a period of time in preparation for these mobilization efforts. Once we get to this point, then there's a lot of logistics that go into it. Not everybody can fly from one place to the Capitol. And so oftentimes you have to organize bus rides. We had 3 buses for this particular mobilization efforts. It was a 55 passenger, almost all were filled. And we needed to be able to mobilize people starting in Miami, moving up to like the Tampa area, and then on to Tallahassee in this case. We also had another bus that was going to meet in Orlando, start in Orlando, and go up to Tallahassee, if my memory serves. And so we had to make sure that we had each of those buses in place in order to support those efforts, not to mention all of the work that we needed to do to ensure that we were in constant communication with the bus riders. Then one of the buses broke down. Anyone who's ever lived in Florida hasn't lived in Florida will be shocked to know that Florida is a very large state. And by that I mean, if you were driving from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which is in Broward County, to Tallahassee, it would take about 7.5 to 8 hours, which is quite a ride, let me tell you. Around Gainesville, the dark of night, there was a bus that broke down. Hours later, we finally got another bus that got everybody on that bus and took them the final leg to Tallahassee. Now, you can imagine people are tired, probably getting a little nervous, exhausted. Did I mention tired and exhausted and hungry? We had packed snacks. We were prepared for any number of things. To be honest, bus ride breakdowns happen, but in the dark of night was not the greatest thing to happen. So it was pretty nerve-wracking, and you obviously have to keep your cool. At this point, most of the folks are already in Tallahassee, and we're prepared to check people in. We have been in constant communication with the hotel over the course of at least a month and a half to 2 months to prepare for all of the logistics, key exchanges, making sure people have the roommates they need. And that is I won't bore you with the details of getting all of that together. But one of the components that I think is really important is thinking through what it looks like to merge different demographics and different communities together. because someone who may come from rural areas may have a different experience when it, not may, does have a different experience when it comes to renters' rights than maybe someone who is a mobile homeowner that lives on the outskirts of Tampa versus a renter who lives in the heart of Miami in Liberty City or Overtown. And so part of your work as the person that's coordinating these efforts is to ensure that you think through whether there are opportunities when people first arrive, and you're having to plan this obviously in the pre-work, where people can engage with each other. Is most people want a room with who they know or room by themselves, in particular because we're adults, and that's part of the work. Budget doesn't always allow for that. So is there opportunity beforehand to help people to get to know each other, have sort of a pen pal type of situation so that you can converge different ideas and different demographics and different personalities so that people can realize that they're here because there's a common cause. And so that's part of the pre-work as well, is ensuring that you create the kind of experiences where people can bond essentially. And that work is very important. And then the last thing I'll talk about when it comes to some of the pre-work that we did in this case is we really ensured that we were talking through all of the logistics while they were there. So that includes everything from meal planning to pickups to when the bus was going to leave, buses and cars and planes were going to leave to return home. And so part of our work is ensuring that we're creating a either document or intranet where people can sort of go and see what is the run of show, in some cases minute by minute, so people can understand what's going to happen day to day. We also have to break down the different groups that are going to meet with the legislators. Really, again, creating bonding experiences so that different people can have different stories to tell when it comes to why renters and mobile homeowners have actually very similar experiences. And so part of that is converging all of that together. We did this in partnership with the convening committee. And so I share that because I think it's really important for people to understand that when you're creating this structure, you're thinking big picture. What happens in my mind is I'm thinking about, if I were in the position of the person on this bus, really passionate about the work that I'm doing, knowing why we're going up there, at every step of the way, I'm picturing myself as him, her, them, right? And so that means I'm thinking about their story, right? $700 increase in rent over the course of 2 to 3 months, knowing that this has at least something to do with corporate greed, understanding that people have a real fear, anger, frustration, a visceral reaction to what's happening in their communities. And so if I'm in their position, the one thing I want to see take place is the kind of structure that makes some of this feel easy. And so the ways that we do that is by thinking through the problem, the intent, the desired outcomes, the action steps. We think about what it's going to take to physically get them there. We think about what it takes to be clear about the narrative that we need to communicate consistently leading up to the day that we're leaving, so that people are always knowing why they have bought into these mobilization efforts. Because oftentimes what happens is we sign up for some of these efforts. Even that takes work. That's for another video for another time. But we sign up for these efforts. And then once we sign up, we sort of take our hands off it. Okay, Jane Smith is going to go. Well, she might have gone 2 months ago, but what's keeping her invested? Any number of things can pull our attention away from these efforts. And so we have to keep people really engaged in the process. Part of how we do that is making sure that we're constantly communicating new news articles, what's happening locally, what's keeping them not just inspired, although that's important, but what are some of the deep ego reasons why people are fired up and ready to go? One of those reasons is because people are scared for their livelihood. And so you want to be communicating the truth of that consistently as the person who's creating some of that structure. Your job may not be about that, but you want to keep some of that in front of mind, as in the front of your mind, so that you're always communicating that when it comes to the meetings and the planning meetings and the emails you're sending out and the responses, etc. And then as you've gone through the problem, intent, desired outcomes, action steps, your narrative, you've met with aides, you've had other people that are a part of these different coalition, the different member organizations that are part of the coalition. They've done the pre-work, maybe they've met with legislators or aides as well. And now you're prepared to get them on the bus, get them on the plane, get them in the car, and you're moving them forward. And so I want to be really clear about the importance of this because when we're working on these efforts, that pre work in some ways is the most important work that you do, right? Because if people have signed up and they're prepared and they're ready to go, they're expecting that the organizers, the logistics people that have laid the foundation, that they're ready for them, just like the member organizations and the base and the members, that they are as ready as the people that are going here to meet with legislators. And so you have to create that structure for them. And so here are some of the ways that I want to leave you with. One, be clear about what the problem is that you are going to your local commission meeting or your school board meeting or the state capitol. Be very clear about the problem. Then you want to be very clear about your intent. Then you want to be clear about the desired outcomes. They are nouns. Be super clear about it. Once you're clear about that, then you want to be clear about your action steps leading up to the mobilization efforts. And that could be a pretty long list. And so we create a phased approach to doing that. We start with understanding exactly what people need, whether it's food allergies, any disabilities, children that may be coming. We also organized childcare. We were aware of people's what their needs were, whether it was rooming by themselves or rooming with someone they knew, whether they were comfortable not rooming with folks. And so all of these logistics were a part of our work. And so I want to pause here to say that we're going to then talk about what happened when we arrived at the Capitol and all that went along with getting people off the bus after one of the buses was stuck for hours and what it meant to bring on translators and interpreters. That work was a part of our organization as well. And so, but that's a lot to sort of dive into. And so we're going to pause here. Please subscribe, comment, and like this video for more. And the next episode of this particular series will talk about what happened when the bus arrived, some almost fallouts, and how we still managed to get through the next 3 to 4 days of people at the state capitol. Okay, please leave comments, questions about your mobilization efforts, your table, your coalition, your alliance, and the work that you're doing in order to really advocate and fight for and throw down for your community or cause. We're doing this work because we really love creating containers for people to be able to work in, and we want to teach you how to do it better, teach you how to do it, period, and teach you how to do it better. Okay, let's bring people together. Thank you.